Welcome to another episode of the Ultimate Cavaliers Show. Mikey McNuggets here. Jason Lloyd is busy being a father, and it's hard to get mad at Jason when he has daddy duties to take care of, but that's not going to stop us from bringing you guys 35 minutes of unfiltered, unadulterated Cavs content. Joining me today is a special guest who has been trying, and we have been trying to get him on the UCSS platform for months now, and the schedules haven't linked up, but that all changes in just a few minutes on this episode of the Ultimate Cavaliers Show. We mentioned it a second ago, no Jason Lloyd, but filling in for Jason Lloyd is the one, the only. It is Mack Perry of the It's Cavalier Pod. Mack, it's been a long time coming. We tried getting you on for a few post-game pods and just it didn't work. And/or the Cavs played like absolute dog crap in those games, and we decided to scrap the post-game show. But appreciate you taking some time to hop on with me today to talk a little Cavs offseason. How you doing, man?
I'm doing okay. I'm just like everybody else, waiting to see which dominoes fall and who ends up where. There's a lot to talk about, as I'm sure we'll get to it. But I'm just like the rest of the fan base out there. I'm just patiently waiting, man.
We are getting to the time where it appears the Cavs are starting to circle at least the pool of candidates they want to bring in for head coaching interviews. I've heard the first round of interviews have been conducted via Zoom. Next week, these coaches will head into Cleveland and do in-person interviews. So we'll see who gets that secondary call. And we'll get to the coaches and we'll get to some NBA draft stuff in a sec, Mac. But I want to start with this because if you guys don't know Mac, I'll give you a real brief background. He's all over Twitter. If you haven't seen Mac on Twitter, you must be hiding under a rock because it's hard on the good or the bad, whether you like Mac or not. His stuff is everywhere. And he likes to look at things through a glass half full perspective, which is a nice counterbalance sometimes to myself or Jason or others. But he's a smart dude. He knows his Cavs. And even if he sees things in a different light than someone else, the beauty is that's why we have discussions and podcasts like this so we can hash it out and try to see if we can come to a middle ground. So, Mac, with that introduction, the Cavs have a decision to make in terms of their core four. Mm-hmm. They have two non-shooting bigs. They have two smaller guards. We saw in the Athletic report when the season ended, Darius Garland had his representation. Let me clarify. His representation said that if Donovan resigns, he may ask for a trade because he wants to be the primary ball handler. Take all that aside and let's just focus in on the four players, Donovan, Darius, Evan, and Jarrett. What's that core four's ceiling without any other real changes to the roster? That four in particular, is that core four good enough to compete and win an NBA championship?
Championship, no. I know that might sound like sacrilege to people who have heard me talk all over Twitter and on my podcast, but if you keep it 100, no. If you're not making any significant change to the roster, you're running all four back. Do I think they alone would comprise a championship caliber team? No. I see some obvious flaws there. I think the team, the core four in general, they are very, very talented individually. I think the problem is that you have so much overlap in many different areas, and you see some redundancy in both the backcourt and the front court. You know, in the backcourt with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, you have two very talented guards, both of which tend to operate best with the ball in their hands. They each can play off ball, but they have yet really to kind of figure out a proper balance. And some of that may have been coaching. Some of that may just specifically be the players themselves. And quite honestly, it's why a lot of people have argued that you're better off with one or the other. And that is really the conversation. I think that's where we're at right now. Some people would say Donovan Mitchell should be the lead guard moving forward and would cite their 14-5 record without Darius Garland, with Donovan Mitchell starting at the point guard position. And we saw that play out in one of the most successful stretches of the season for the Cavaliers. And then there, conversely, as you had brought up, Darius Garland, who's coming off maybe his worst season from an impact standpoint since his rookie year. And it was just so rough to watch him at points. And those people out there who have listened to me talk about Darius at all know how big of a fan I am of him, but there's a lot of issues here. And that's really not even diving deep into it. And then you look at the other side of things here in the front court, which is probably more of an important question at this point in time with Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley in terms of the future, right? We know Jarrett Allen is a terrific player in his own right. He brings a lot to the table. We know Evan Mobley is still developing, and he's already such a phenomenal defender in his own right. It seems like a burgeoning offensive talent. But as I opened with saying, there's some overlap here.
Yeah.
Neither of these two players can space the floor consistently, although it was nice to see Evan Mobley kind of up the attempts when he came back from the injury. But we are far from the area where we can truly label him a stretch big. And so without having a true floor stretching presence in there, it's hard for me to say, man, that this team, as currently constructed, can win a championship. Now, there are a few caveats with that, but how are you feeling in regards to the core four?
Well, lesson learned. I thought you were going to take a different answer with that, a different approach with that answer. I'll be honest. I thought you were going to say yes. And lesson learned, when me and Mac think alike, he's going to take all the main points I was going to hit on. So I feel pretty aligned with you. You mentioned the pieces all being talented individually and together, maybe not fitting. And I use this analogy on the show today, and I'm going to say it again. They are clearly 4 puzzle pieces. They just may not be 4 pieces of the same puzzle. And separate, they absolutely fit into a championship caliber roster. I think Darius could be the point guard on a championship team. I think Donovan could be the lead scorer on a championship team. I think Evan could be a focal point of a championship team defense. And I think Jarrett Allen could be the center on a championship team. Together, I just don't know what the ceiling is. And at the end of the season press conference that Kobe Altman had, he kept referring to the net rating between the core 4, saying, Look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. The numbers tell us that this group works. I like Kobe. Me and Kobe have a pretty good relationship. I got to push back on Kobe because the numbers he's referring to, and I'm going to pull them up in a sec, work in the regular season. And we know what the Cavs can do in the regular season. They won 51 games last year, where they finished with 49 this year. They had the 5th most regular season wins in the NBA over the last 2 years. The issue is, when the postseason rolled around, do we want to talk about those net rating numbers, Kobe? And the question is, not so much. And shout out to my guy, Justin Rowan, who pulled these numbers today from the Chase Down pod. Justin does an awesome job covering the Cavs. On the left is the regular season. On the right is the postseason. It's small. Go check him out on Twitter. But the core 4 over the last 2 postseasons in 1,052 possessions, which is no small sample size, has a negative net rating. You look at the top right quad of this graphic. There's a lot more negatives than there are positives, Mac. And my eye test and the numbers match on this one, where what they do in the regular season works because it's the regular season. And when push comes to shove, when defenses tighten up, when coaches make adjustments game in and game out, the Cavs don't have the counter adjustments to score enough points, frankly, to compete with the Bostons, with the Denvers, with the Dallases, with the top teams in the NBA. So this comes down to a simple question. What is good enough in your mind? If your expectation and your goal, which was to win one playoff round, it seems like that was the Cavs' expectation and goal from the start of the season. If we could win one playoff round, we could show progress, and maybe that's enough to keep our jobs, and it turned out not to be. But if that was their goal, then this core 4 money, don't break it up. No point. If your goal is to compete at the highest level with the teams like Boston, like a Dallas, like an OKC, like a Denver, teams that we consider in the championship hunt year in and year out, I don't think this core 4 is good enough as currently constructed. And I'm not sure how you improve the core 4 without splitting it up, because you don't have any other assets. You don't have draft picks, the other role guys on the team. You're not bringing in an impact 3, which I think is what this team desperately needs more than anything else, without splitting up DG and Donovan or Jarrett and Evan. So I'm not quite sure how you fix the problem without splitting it up. And because of that, I agree with you. I think there's a limited ceiling on the current construction of this core 4.
I think the problem, and we all see it, right? And it took me a while to get to this conclusion, as most other fans have gotten to. Like, we want to see the core 4 as they are constructed. We want to see them be successful. We're at this place right now where we have so much redundancy between the backcourt and the front court, where there's just is not a lot of area for upward mobility without moving one of these guys. Now, that is not me advocating for the Cavaliers to go that route just yet. There is still a huge part of me that wants to see, hey, can a new voice, a new coach get more out of this group? Can you get guys to maybe operate a little differently? Can you put the ball back in Darius Garland's hands? Are you going to put the ball in Donovan Mitchell's hand full time as the point guard of this team? Yeah. There are a lot of different conversations that can be had, but at the end of the day, they still have a huge problem in regards to floor spacing, in regards to not really having enough big wings on this roster. And, all respect to Max Strus, I'm a huge Isaac Okoro fan still. Carousel, you can even throw him in there at certain points, depending upon the lineup. But without moving one of these core pieces, you're not likely to get back a huge upgrade or something that would substantially move the needle. And so, as you pointed out, what's the goal here? The goal is championship. You may be forced with a decision here in which you have to move off of one of these guys, if not two. And we've already heard that there are rumblings of Jarrett Allen drawing a ton of interest as he has for a past 1 to 2 seasons now. And then Darius Garland, we don't know how much stock to put into it, but with Rich Paul saying what he said in regards to a possible trade request upon a Donovan Mitchell extension, this could go a number of ways. But at the end of the day, I'm just stuck, man, because I realize that there are no real avenues to improve that starting unit without moving one of these guys. And I'm a huge fan of each one of them individually and collectively. And then on the other hand, I'm like, man, would another year under a new coach make things, would a different outcome? Would we be moving forward? Would there be progression? But I think the problem that we have reached is, does that align with the Donovan Mitchell of it all? Does it align with the timeline? Because as much as continuity matters, as we've seen other teams take this long approach, look at the Denver Nuggets, Boston Celtics, a lot of other teams that you could point to out there that have taken a long time to enter the contention window. Does Cleveland actually have that runway anymore that Kobe Altman initially thought he may have had when he first traded for Donovan? And I'm not so sure that exists anymore.
Yeah, that's fair. We'll talk head coaches in 1 sec with Mac, just to wrap up the core 4 conversation. If the Cavs had to trade either Darius or Jarrett Allen, just for the sake of mixing it up, who would you look to trade first if you were Kobe Altman? I think there's an obvious answer. I'm curious if you agree. Who would you look to trade first? Who would you prefer to keep if you only had to move one of them?
Man, I'm sure I'm probably gonna defer here from you, but I think the obvious answer to me is Jarrett Allen, because he has more trade value, in my opinion, right now, especially factoring in his contract. And I think when you're looking at Evan Mobley's fit at the 5, you can probably get away with another year of Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell in your backcourt, because we did just see prior to this abysmal year filled with injuries and confidence issues and whatever else that may have come Darius Garland's way, there are definitely sample sizes that would indicate that you can get more from Darius Garland than what you have gotten. Can you say the same for Jarrett Allen right now?
No, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think you can overcome 2 talented guards figuring out how to work together. A new coach would help that. I just don't think in today's NBA you can overcome the ceiling that you are limited with 2 non-shooting bigs. And that's a big question mark of, well, maybe Evan Mobley can develop a 3, but if I have to bet heading into next season, what is a better likelihood of happening? Evan Mobley being a legitimate, consistent 3-point shooter, or Darius Garland snapping out of the funk he was in all season and at least getting back closer to his all-star form? I'm going to bet on DG returning to closer to all-star form than Evan going from a guy who would take an open shot if left open, but clearly wasn't looking to shoot threes, into a consistent, viable floor spacer that can't just make shots in the regular season, but teams have to guard in the postseason. I think we sometimes get a little too, and I don't want to make a bigger deal than it has to be, but Isaac Okoro was the perfect example. Made shots in the regular season, come postseason time, they weren't guarding him and couldn't buy a bucket. And, making shots in game 37 in the regular season does not equate to making shots in game 3 of the postseason. We're going to take a quick break, Mac, and remind everybody that the Ultimate Cavaliers Show, just like everything else, is brought to you by FanDuel. And right now it's winner take all time on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're looking to bet, you better be using FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 you can use to bet on everything from player props and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/UCSS and win big on America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Mac. So far, we've had 6 candidates be called into Cleveland for an interview, a virtual interview. And those 6 include Kenny Atkinson, James Borrego, Chris Quinn, Johnny Bryant, Dave Adelman, and I'm missing the one name from yesterday, Mike Inori from Minnesota. Those are the 6 names. Mac, if it was up to you right now, is there a name that's not on the list yet you think should be? And of the 6, who's your top choice to fix the Cavs and become their new head coach?
Honestly, I'm pretty okay with the list of candidates that we've gotten out there. Maybe Sam Cassell. I don't know. These are all interesting candidates, all with their flaws and all coming with specific areas of expertise. If I had to select one right now that's a front runner for me, probably would be Dave Adelman, just because he's helped lead that Nuggets team to a top 5 offense over the past couple of seasons. Obviously, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray and company, they all have something to do with that. But you need stars, right? You need players to execute your offense. I think Adelman has really, really just steered the ship in a great direction there. He's highly regarded by the players. You could take a look at some of the quotes from Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic believing that he deserves a real chance to be a head coach. Second for me would probably be Borrego, but we've seen some rumors linking him possibly to that Lakers staff. So I don't know, man. And then on the offensive side of the ball with Borrego, having the ability to bump that New Orleans offense from 20th to 11th in offensive efficiency, that entices me, because I feel like most of the Cavaliers' problems outside of the simple rotations that people complained about with JB all the time are offensive based. I think there are a lot of things that this team could probably still do to get more out of the core 4 if it remains intact. Or, I mean, if you bring in an offensive mind, I think that would really, really get the best out of this group. But those are the two that really stick out to me right now. I do like Nori. I think Chris Quinn is probably up there for me as well, but you're going to be taking a chance on just about everybody here. And that's even without mentioning Kenny Atkinson, who does come with with some experience, probably outside of Borrego, maybe the most experienced name mentioned so far.
The only guy who hasn't gotten a call yet, who I still think will and should, is Dave Yeager, who was a consultant here with the Cavs and has more experience than both Atkinson and Borrego, and more experience than Nori and Adelman, Chris Quinn and Brian as well. It's funny because when this coaching search started, you always say, fire the coach. It's the first thing, easy change, without necessarily knowing who the replacement's going to be. And I'll be honest, big picture, and we're wrong more times than we're right with this. So none of these names are sexy. I'm just going to be honest.
None of these that's names fair. That's fair.
Me out the water. There's not an Ime Udoka or a guy like a Nick Nurse who was available last offseason. Like,
you saw how fast Budenholzer got snatched up too. Like the names with that actually have like championship caliber contendership on their resume, they're gone. They were really never there.
And it's hard to get those because if you're in the playoffs, the teams that aren't are going to snatch them up just like that. And I thought Charles Lee, who Charlotte hired, was, in my opinion, like, he's the assistant coach I think has a chance to be a really, really, really good head coach over some of these other guys. And that's not to say they won't turn out to be good coaches. The reality is we have no idea, right? Chris Quinn, for example, who I'm not all in on, but he's my personal top choice at the moment, could end up being a terrific head coach, Mac. He could also be a giant dud. And we literally won't know unless he gets the chance and we see what he can do. And you see coaches like a Borrego who went to Charlotte, and that roster was horrific, and he wasn't able to kind of corral him. But I'm not willing to say he's a bad coach just because it didn't work in Charlotte. I don't think anyone could have made that work in Charlotte. So I really don't know how to judge these guys. I've talked to a couple of my friends throughout the league, and they speak so highly of Chris Quinn that they've kind of swayed me into the Chris Quinn mold. They talk about him being the perfect blend of player empathy as a veteran, travel journeyman point guard in the league, understanding what it takes to be a player at the end of the bench to fight just for a roster spot with 10 years of SPO and the analytics that he brings to the table. He feels like the perfect mix of it all. You look at a guy like Adelman, Mac, who Denver ran more organized offense than almost any team in basketball. When you look at the Cavs, core 4 or not core 4, regardless, they didn't run a ton of organized basketball. It was kind of come down, and it ran more sets than they get credit for, but it was come down, fake motion, distraction to get to a pick and roll. Like, it wasn't a ton of true organized offense. So that intrigues me. And how could you use Evan Mobley in an organized offense maybe as more of a focal point? Mike Nori, he's been part of the evolution of a bunch of great big men in the NBA. He was there with DeMarcus Cousins in Sacramento. He was there with Jokic in Denver. He rejuvenated Blake Griffin's career in Detroit. He was with Karl Anthony Towns the last few years in Minnesota. He intrigues me. So I wish I could combine all these guys and put them into one person.
Yeah.
Because I like different individual traits from different individual candidates. But I'm going to be totally honest. I'm not blown away by any one name on the list. That's not to say one of these guys can't turn out to be a great head coach. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm not blown away, and I don't know enough about these guys and the inner workings of what they'd bring as a head coach to pick like a guy, hey, I think he's the right choice as opposed to someone else. But I just say big picture, none of these guys gets me. I don't say gets me going. It's not the right way to say it. Like, none of these guys excites me in the way. That's even worse. None of these guys would excite me as much as they're the head coach as if a guy like Ime Udoka was, who I know was a slam dunk. This guy's going to right the ship. And with the timeline the Cavs have, as you mentioned earlier, for better or worse, they're kind of in win now mode.
I guess
they're kind of in win now. So if you're going to take a chance on a guy like a Chris Quinn who's unknown, you better hope you're right, because if you're wrong, this whole thing could fall apart way faster than we want it to.
Do you believe that is part of the reason why it took so long to let JB go? Because there just wasn't a large, there wasn't a huge pool of well-known established head coaches to choose from?
This, like, from the end of the season to now?
Mm-hmm.
No, I actually don't believe that whatsoever. I truly believe, and this is part what I've been told, part piecing together the puzzle. I don't think JB Bickerstaff would have been fired if it was just up to Kobe Altman.
Okay.
And that's what I mentioned earlier about expectations. I think they came into the season saying, hey, let's win a playoff series. That's progression. We're good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was purely Kobe Altman's decision to fire JB Bickerstaff. And I think it took a week. I think it was 8 days, a week or 8 days.
Yeah.
Because Kobe was, and to his credit, he was at the draft combine. He's doing other things, and he's trying to battle. Hey, if I fire JB, can I find someone else? But also weighing, hey, what does Donovan want to do? And also weighing, well, is Donovan going to be here to help make that decision? And I think it all kind of played into it. And at the end of the day, I think it was the right move to move on from JB, just because I feel like once the cat's out of the bag, if you lose the locker room, I've been there. It's so hard to get it back. And when I say so hard, I actually think it's damn near impossible. And it just felt like the cat was out of the bag. And at that point, you have to move on. But I don't think Kobe was looking at JB saying, you're the reason we weren't able to compete. Like, look how hard they played in games 4 and 5 against Boston without half their starting lineup. Like, he should.
I think he got him to buy. Like, he clearly was able to connect with them enough to get them to overachieve at certain areas, especially given the injuries. But it was pretty clear that he probably had overstayed his welcome in many regards, and that the team had probably reached their peak with him at their helm. And that's coming from a guy who preferably
he was awesome. By the way, Max, sorry to cut you off. JB was awesome. Like, to us in media, JB was awesome. And it sucks to see someone get fired. But when you hear Marcus Morris say what he said, coming in and just being like, yeah, those guys weren't listening to him, you can't bring him back. You're handcuffed. You're tied. So I'm not sure they had a better option. But to answer your question, I don't think Kobe would have fired him if it was just Kobe's decision.
I think that's fair.
All right, we're going to talk a little draft, Mac, and I know you dove into this, but a quick reminder, the Ultimate Cleveland Show is on Monday through Friday, 11 to 1. We have spinoff shows, Ultimate Cavs, Ultimate Guardians, Ultimate Browns, Ultimate 216, and you can make sure you check out Mack's podcast. It's called the It's Cavalier Podcast. What's that, Mac? Once a week, whenever you feel like it? I know
whenever I feel like it, basically.
Mac's a dad now, just like Jason, so I know it's a little tougher. But that doesn't stop Mac from diving in. And Mac, the draft is coming up 3 weeks from today. The Cavs have the 20th pick. They don't have a second-round pick. Some previous 20th overall picks. Last year was Cam Whitmore. In 2022, it was Malachi Branham. 2021, it was Jalen Johnson, who's turned out to be a stud in Atlanta. Precious Achiuwa in 2020. Matisse Thybulle in 2019. There have been some pretty good 20th overall picks in the last couple of drafts. This year's draft, Mac, is a complete crapshoot top to bottom.
Yeah.
But who are some of the guys you have looked at and identified as targets you think the Cavs should at least be interested in as they get their draft board ready for later this month?
The top three to me, and bear in mind, we have no idea how highly some of these NBA teams covet these guys. We've seen the mocks consistently move because, as you said, there's no consensus number one, and it appears to be somewhat of a watered down draft. But the three names that have really stuck out to me specifically in regards to the Cavs are Deron Holmes, huge fan, and being from Dayton, Ohio, I'm sorry, there's a little bit of bias there. I got to point that out. I mean, yeah, huge fan of him. Got a breakdown coming of him. Tyler Smith, he is also another developmental type of guy that I do see a possible fit with the Cavaliers eventually. May not be a day one contributor. And Tristan Da Silva.
Yes. Glad you said him. That's my guy. So you start.
So in regards to De Silva, man, there's just a lot to like there. Obviously, the size. That's the one thing that really sticks out to me. The Cavaliers need a big wing just very, very badly. The 3-point shooting, that is something that any wing that the Cavaliers, really any player, I believe, the Cavaliers draft is going to need to be able to bring to the table. So that is number one. The shooting, the size, those are all on the table for me. He's shown semblances of switchability on the defensive end where he can possibly D up a couple of different position groups. So those three to me are the names that stick out. Some dark horses, maybe on Jalen Tyson. That is a name to me that really has stuck out, but the size is still a concern there. But those are some of the names that really, really have caught my attention. If I had to nail it down to one prospect right now who I do believe will be in range for the Cavaliers, it is Holmes, man. I'm sorry, Mikey, I do not think De Silva will be there at 20. I think somebody's going to snatch him up. But if he's gone, you got to give me Holmes.
Yeah, I like De Silva, and you look at the mocks and any of like the big boards, he's ranked between 14 and 22.
Yeah.
So he should be in the range where the Cavs are picking. With this draft, a guy who's ranked 23rd in the big board could go third, and I wouldn't be shocked. And I've talked to guys from the Western Conference, guys from the Eastern Conference. There's literally no consensus whatsoever on who the top 5 or 6 guys in this draft are. I'm telling you, it's going to be wild, and guys are going to get picked highly that you're like, he was in the ringers. He was the 34th pick in the ringers, and he was a lot like, wow. I'm just telling you now, be ready for it. The reason I like De Silva, Mac, is, and full disclosure, I had never seen him play before the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
My introduction to Tristan De Silva was when Colorado made the second round in the NCAA tournament. And I've went back and watched a ton of film now. And on him particular, he's just a connector.
Yes.
Like, he didn't need the ball. He was a guy who, when he got his opportunities, was capable of shooting. He was a driver. I don't think he'll be a knockdown, like traditional 3-and-D guy, but he certainly isn't a stiff who can't shoot. He's 6'8", 6'9". He's a really good passer. They ran offense through him as the high post facilitator. And he just seemed, no matter what the Colorado Buffaloes were asking him to do, whether it was handle the ball at the Florida's press, whether it was facilitate, whether it was score, whether it was defend, he kind of just fit in and did anything with ease. And no matter which game you watched, whether it was the tournament, the Pac-12 championship, or during the regular season, he just seamlessly flowed in and out of games, Mac. And that feels like if the Cavs are going to keep the core 4 together, which once again, we talked about earlier, we're both in favor of breaking it up if you're trying to win a championship. That's the kind of guy you need who can seamlessly fit in without taking too much away from the guards while also being able to feed the bigs down low. So to me, he kind of represents the best of both worlds in size and defense, while also adding value on the offensive end of the court without taking away from everybody else. A couple of prospects I mentioned as well that are mocked to the Cavs, Endor Wright in that same situation, Kaishan George out of Miami, Jacoby Walter out of Baylor, Johnny Furf, I always pronounce his name. It's the Furphy, right? Out of Kansas. He's a big shooting white guy who kind of looks like Lauri Markkanen, but doesn't have the game like Lauri Markkanen, and Carl Carrington.
Bub.
They all have upsides. They all have flaws. When you're picking 20th overall, that's what you're going to get. Bronny James is right around that range, possibly, God. By the way. The Cavs do have a first-round pick to use. They don't have a second-round pick, so if they're going to take Bronny, that's the spot they're going to take him. I would not anticipate that happening, but for the content purposes, I'd be all for it, Mac. But I do think in a weaker draft at the top like this, the chances of the Cavs getting an impact player at 20, I think, is actually higher than it would be in a traditional draft where you know the best 15 guys are going in the lottery or 14, whatever. And then you're kind of stuck picking outside of the next at 20. I think in this draft, like, of the first 14 picks, 6 of those guys could be studs, 8 could be duds. And of the 10 best dudes in the draft, you have a chance to a higher percentage of getting one of those top 10 later than usual, just because there's no consensus and no team really has a good feel on any of these guys. Do you feel the same way, or you think I'm overthinking the Cavs' chances at 20 here?
No, I honestly do believe that they could end up getting a day one contributor. It's very possible. I'm not going to say it's likely, but I do believe, depending upon who that selection is, I do think De Silva of this group of guys could certainly be that guy. He's certainly plug and play in that area. Seems to always make an impact. But yeah, I mean, I think the chance of them getting a day one contributor is particularly high depending upon the position that they select. If you do keep the core 4 intact, if you select a guard, not a good chance that guard sees the court a ton in year one. If you're going wing, I think there's absolutely a case to be made that guy will play some minutes or have a shot at earning a rotation spot or at least have a battle in camp. If you go the route of a third big, if you keep the bigs together, or if you move one of the two and you want to still go big, I do believe that a player like Holmes, a player like Tyler Smith eventually could end up factoring in to the rotation at some point. So I do think that there's a pretty high chance that they get somebody who can make an impact at some level.
And one other name to mention, I don't think he'll fall. His upside's too high. But Ron Holland, a guy at G League Ignite who was the number 1 overall prospect coming out of high school. His offensive game is a work in progress. But from an athleticism and a defensive standpoint at the wing position would be a really nice fit. Think Isaac Okoro-ish, but 6'8.5", 6'9". And that's a really good start when you're going to build upon someone late in the lottery or late in the first round. Mac, we got some fan questions we're going to get to. You ready?
Sure.
Araya says, I wonder what we can realistically do this offseason in terms of free agent signings. Now, the Cavs cap space is dependent on what Donovan Mitchell does. They will probably, and I'm going to guess and take a little liberty here, Mac. Let's say they get the mid-level exception, the full mid-level exception. Have you looked at the free agent list yet? Because, spoiler alert, I have, and there's not a ton of great options that fit what the Cavs are looking for.
I have, and just like you, there's not a lot of names out there that the Cavaliers should be enticed enough to really spend big to get, or they really don't even have enough to really be able to do that. I mean, if I'm looking for positional need, the Cavs do still need a third big, depending upon what they end up doing in the draft. Maybe an Andre Drummond reunion if he's out there. I don't know. There are some names out there that potentially make sense at the big position. But as far as wings are concerned, it's a dry market.
Nick Batum was the best I could come up with who realistically fits like kind of what they need.
Yeah.
He was good in the playoffs. Like Nick Batum played a legit role for the Sixers, but
he's multifaceted. And see, this is the thing. The Cavaliers, and I see somebody suggest the other day that they could possibly use a guy like Jeremy Sohan, and I'm just like, the Cavs need wings who can shoot for one. They need big wings. If you're gonna get a wing, they have to be able to shoot, and they have to be a big wing. Batum, I suppose, would make sense. He does check some boxes. He is multifaceted, but I don't know, man. There's not really a dearth of talent out there.
There's not a perfect fit on paper for the money they have. And frankly, even if they had more money, it's a pretty weak free agent class anyway, assuming that Paul George doesn't hit free agency and some of the guys who would be trade candidates. It's not a great. Taurean Prince is another guy I think who fits it. He's bounced around. I've always liked his game more than it feels like every team he's been on has, which may tell you about Taurean Prince more than, they see him every day and we don't. But Royce O'Neal's another guy. I think he's going to go back to Phoenix.
Yeah, that's what's being reported at least.
Dorian Finney-Smith's a trade candidate. He'd be a nice fit. Would the Cavs do it? Or would the Nets take? They turned down 2 firsts for him last year, which would take a first, and I don't know what else they can offer. Like they don't have a ton of assets, unfortunately. So it kind of is what it is. Diesel said, would you trade the player we pick at 20 for a proven wing, knowing what you know about the draft class and available free agents? We need cheap assets to sustain the long term, but it's win now time. I'll take the first stab at that, Mac. I don't know who you're trading the number 20 pick for in this draft that's going to be a commodity that you could help because, and this will allude to this with the next question. Someone asked the Darius Garland trade package. I have a few. I'm not going to give them. We're going to do it as a segment next week on the show. The Rockets are actively trying to trade the 3rd overall pick. Like they're begging someone to give them a half decent player for the 3rd pick. What are you getting for the 20th? I don't think it's a player that's moving the needle whatsoever, unfortunately.
Not in this draft. I mean, you're going to have to, and that's why people are clamoring for one of these core members to be moved, because if you're going to get a substantial upgrade, not just somebody who's a placeholder, but somebody who can legitimately be part of the timeline here, what the Cavaliers want to do, you're likely going to have to attach a piece or two along with that pick. And I'm just not sure that's worth it. I'd rather just keep the selection, making it take a chance on one of these young developmental prospects who could turn out to be a serviceable player.
Yeah. All right. Next one's from Rumple Firstskin. He said, guys, give me your optimal trade package that fits if we go that route, which was in terms of trading Allen or DG. I'll give you one DG trade that I whipped up. And this is before we preface this, Mac, I'm not saying the Cavs would do this. I'm not saying the other team would do this. I'm just going to give you a trade that I think fits in terms of return for value. I'm not saying the Cavs or the other team would do this, but I'll give you one, and we're going to do a whole segment on this next week on UCSS. If Washington offered Kyle Kuzma in the second pick, would you do it for DG?
Kyle Kuzma in the second pick? That is enticing. That is enticing. I think I would.
So that's one example. Now, if you do something like that, you're taking on a young player who doesn't fit your timeline now, which then gets you back to the development versus winning. And we just saw how that went with Evan Mobley. But I think that's along the lines of a package for Darius Garland that the Cavs would be looking at in return. Let's see. Diesel said, would you keep the core four together if there was an average to good wing player alongside them? Yes.
I think that's fair. I don't know how you're going to accomplish that without moving one of these guys. Yes. That's the problem. Like, and I'm reading some of these comments down here, and I'm just like, okay, we all know that they need a wing. We all know that the backcourt fit. They're a smallish backcourt. We get all of these things. We know the redundancies in the front court. The problem, guys, is that the Cavaliers do not have the requisite assets. Sans moving one of these guys to actually accomplish the upgrade that a lot of people want to make, especially with this draft class.
And Soul Train says it won't happen, but I like the idea of getting CJ McCollum and Trey Murphy, a bigger vet guard who can play with Donovan, and a true small forward that's 6'9". Trey Murphy is my number one dream target this offseason for the Cavs. There's just no chance New Orleans is trading him. And they have other wings. They're more likely to give you Ingram. They're more likely to give you Herb Jones. And if you want to get a guy like Murphy, you're going to have to give up both Allen and DG. And if you are going to trade two pieces of the core four, I think you get the most value in return by setting him in two separate deals. Unless you're getting a king's ransom, which I think would have to be more than just Murphy and McCollum. I don't think you could trade them to the same team just based on some of the returns you can get. So
what is Zion Williamson coming back?
Yeah.
There just is not a lot of avenues that the Cavaliers can take that would make sense for other teams, frankly. Herb Jones, that name sounds nice. Listen, if we're gonna trade, we can't go from we can't play two non-shooting bigs to we're gonna play a non-shooting big and a non-shooting wing. Hey,
you need more shooters. And Herb Jones is a better shooter than currently Mobley and Allen, but you need more shooters. Soul Train also says if he wasn't for his image and bad decisions, Miles Bridges would have been a good fit. What's your take, Mac? Would you be willing to entertain a Miles Bridges not reunion, but a Miles Bridges trip to Cleveland, knowing what he's done in the past?
No. That I can flat out say definitively no. And it's not like he's a highly respectable shooter either. I guess defenses do have to account for him taking that shot, but no, I'm good on Bridges.
DJ Brobot says we have to stop having reunions with old Cavs that don't move the needle. Find a young big from somewhere else like other teams do. We had Hartenstein and gave him up. That hurt. So that does hurt, by the way. Like knowing
it hurts, but look at why that decision was made. I mean, you keep Hartenstein, you probably don't have Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen together, at least for these last two seasons. It's probably not likely. And look, Hartenstein is good in his role. The dude is possibly going to make $100+ million. Would you really have wanted to pay Hartenstein that type of money for the role that he occupies?
It's tough. And he turned out to be way better than we could have ever imagined here in Cleveland. And that's a testament to the Knicks for developing him and a testament for Hartenstein for keeping at it. It does suck when you get a guy for we were going through all of Kobe Altman's moves the other day, Mac.
Mm-hmm.
And he's done a pretty good job. And Kobe has his flaws. He has done a pretty good job acquiring talent in Cleveland. Like, he got Lauri Markkanen for nothing. He got Karis LeVert for Ricky Rubio, who then he re-signed Ricky Rubio 4 months later. He got Jarrett Allen for a first-round pick. He's done a pretty good job acquiring talent, for better or worse. He got Hartenstein for literally pennies, and it didn't work here, and he turned out to be way better. And you can blame 38 different people for the reason why that happened. It just didn't work here, but it does suck when you see guys who you had here and couldn't contribute flourish in a spot, especially when they're beating you in the playoffs. Like, it doesn't help that the Knicks and Hartenstein in particular were bullying Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley last year.
We got a front row seat to that.
Yeah. All right, Mac, final thoughts here. We went a little over. That's okay. I'll deal with the bosses on the back end. But any final thoughts as we wrap up here as the Cavs continue their offseason pursuit of bettering their team for the 2024-2025 campaign?
I'm just going to say this, despite the very, very disheartening period of time throughout this season, I do believe that there's still a lot of excitement to be had in regards to the direction this team could possibly be heading in. Starts with the head coaching search. We know the domino of Donovan Mitchell has to fall eventually. In the draft, there's still a lot to be excited about. And so that's where I'm at right now. I know the Cavaliers are probably not going to have a noteworthy offseason in terms of acquisitions, but this could certainly be one that has a lot of repercussions moving forward. So I'm very excited to see what this team does this offseason.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of moving pieces. Interesting to see who gets a second interview. Like I said, the first interviews were via Zoom. Next week, they start having the in-person interviews, and we'll see who's really a candidate and who kind of just got the interview for the sake of getting an interview to check a box or offer a favor. So I'm curious to see which direction they go. And no disrespect, by the way. To get an interview is an interview. You just got to make the second round of interviews to be truly considered for the head coaching job. And we talked about names. I think there's a favorite in the clubhouse right now. And we'll see if the favorite ends up winning out in the end. It's Kenny Atkinson. It's been reported 100 times, but he was the front runner when it started. Mm-hmm. And we'll see if he ends up being the guy that Cavs ultimately choose to lead them into the future. Mac, I appreciate you joining us on the Ultimate Cavalier Show. Make sure you check out Mac on the It's Cavalier pod during the season. He does post-game shows every game, which is a crazy exercise, but someone has to do it, and I'm glad it's not me. Make sure you guys check out Mac. Make sure you follow him on Twitter. His handle is right there under. It's at, is it Devarion? I never know how to pronounce that, Mac.
Devron. That's my middle name, actually. Yes, my first name is Mac. For those people out there who have asked me before, that is my first name.
And last thing, Mac, Celtics, Mavericks, who wins how many games?
Oh, give me the Mavericks in 7. I'm not going to use the words that I'd love to use right now, but I'm not a huge fan of Boston.
I also do not like Boston. I want to pick Dallas. Everyone's picking Dallas, which scares me. So I'm switching back to the Celtics in 7.
Oh,
and that hurts me because too many people are on the Mavs bandwagon. But I did bet Dallas because their odds were plus 188, and that's way too juicy of a line for me not to touch when I do think Dallas is just as good as Boston. All right, Mac, it's been a pleasure, my man. We'll see you next time. Appreciate y'all tuning in to the Ultimate Cavaliers Show. We'll see you tomorrow on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Peace.